I'm here.
Okay, cool.
You're here.
Yes.
How's it
This is
going?
exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. It's going good. I'm feeling good. I'm excited to talk about this. Yeah, I don't know exactly like everything I want to talk about, but I think I don't know. I thought it was a very I just was kind of regretting not posting about it or like getting a recorded conversation down about the game because I feel like some interesting things like I felt like there was interesting stuff that happened and
Yeah,
like
agreed.
it was yeah, and it was like a very varied experience for me as like GMing it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it might be worth yeah, like going over some of the stuff.
Yeah, do you want to dive in now? Um,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, let's try it. Let's try it.
All right.
Yeah, so I think
Maybe
looking back,
no, yeah, sorry, go ahead. You go
yeah, so
first.
the main thing that I was thinking about wanting to get down, because I'm like not able to do the typing I want to do and stuff, my
Hmm.
hand injuries and stuff. I think the main thought that I wanted to get down was like what it means to like how to be able to play a game and kind of know that like you are the one who's choose your group is really the you're really owning what you're doing. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know a great way to put it, but basically, so like playing Villains and Vigilantes, playing this game of Villains and Vigilantes we played. Um, and like we can dive into a bunch of other stuff, but the main thing that I felt like was going through the book. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't really care to use. I didn't care about like there's some parts of the book like there's a whole section of like rolling for like events that might be happening, like basically like hooks for what the characters might be doing. So like you might roll that there's like a bank robbery or something,
Right.
like stuff like that, or like some kind of natural disaster. There's like a whole section like that. But then there's other things that I feel like are kind of just thrown in there that I feel like we really used a lot. Like,
Oh yeah.
um, yeah, and that ended up like there's like a little table of different like animals, and I think that was really inspiring for me because there's like a T-Rex there and stuff and things like
Yeah.
that. And so and then there's like I don't know. So I felt like when we were playing and I really felt like I was really using the text really like well, and like I didn't care about what the authors were thinking about or anything. And then I remember like I've struggled a lot with running Circle of Hands
Hmm.
because for some reason I felt like, oh, this is like a game, and this is not like a criticism of the text or the game. It's like this mindset that I was in where I was like, okay, this is a game I really want to get right. And so I cared maybe too much about like the idea that there was some true thing to get at instead of just being like, okay, here's the rules. I'm just going to use them how I want to.
Right.
Um, we're going to see like what I like and just go from there. Um, not like just making it up as you go along, but do you know what I mean? Like feeling like you like, and if you mess up, it doesn't matter because you're just like, no, we're just doing this, and it's not really anything holy. So basically, like going into Villains and Vigilantes, I felt like I didn't care about any kind of getting the original game right at all. I didn't care at all
Yes.
about that. Um, so that was the main little thing, and I've just been thinking about like why does that happen to me for certain games, not for others. I think it's a lot more to do with. I think it can be to do with what the text is like, but I think in some cases it's not. Like Circle of Hands, I don't think it's from the text. I think there's like something outside of that for me personally, or something. So, um, yeah, that's my that was kind of my thing I think I had been thinking about a lot, like looking back on this game.
Yeah, and I think that this Villains and Vigilantes, this run on it was remarkable from that perspective. Because we like you said, I think we all went in with not low expectations or high expectations of like the procedural aspects of the system, but really no expectations. And I mean, me personally, I was blown away by how good that game is. Like, it's
Oh
clearly
yeah,
made by people who love comics, who have read a ton of superhero comics, and who like want to help you do that at your
right.
table. And I mean, going in, I'm trying to think about my changing relationship to the procedures and kind of thinking about it in a evolutionary sense that I think um, when we were rolling characters, we were snickering a little bit at like rolling for hit factors based on weight. Like, there's some pretty Byzantine
Yes, yes.
arithmetic in there. So some of the ways you arrive at your character's stats are a little odd or idiosyncratic. Um, I think kind of the same thing with the random power. Like, we all rolled for our random powers. I don't think any of us took weaknesses. I think we just, we're kind of happy um, with our initial
Yeah, right.
rollout. Yeah, and
Yes.
and again, you end up going in with no expectations. You end up with a very a very weird distribution of powers. Like, I think our co-player Robin rolled like telepathy, which includes mind control, and then also like enhanced endurance, which gives you like a big chunk of
Yep.
health. Even
Yeah.
though, yeah, so and then my character ended up having um, a lot of like combat oriented abilities, but very little health, and so you get these
Hmm.
weird things. And I think we were looking at those characters in that character creation session and just being like, what the hell are we gonna do with this? But I mean, to your point about the game being about, or play being about what we do, what we choose to do. Um, like those random elements aren't like creative prompts given to us. They're material that we adopt or don't. And I mean, I know like Robin and I both adopted those characters, right into our hearts and just like played
Yeah.
the hell out of them. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, I think I don't know. I hear people talking about like OSR procedures for like they'll call it like random environment generation. I'd say like situation generation, and a lot of the times that's about they talk about it as though it's disclaiming responsibility. I don't want to make a decision, so I will roll. But I think about it much more like this is bounce for the GM, the same kind of
Hmm.
fun bounce maybe you get in character creation, the GM also gets to participate in, right? Because then you adopt those elements and make them your own. And so yeah, I think just to your point, I think that idea of like choosing, really being aware that like we are the ones playing the game isn't playing us. This it was like really clear here, and I also think we did it really well. Like, we played 7 full sessions plus one for character creation, and I mean,
Right.
amazing. It was like some of the best role playing I had all year. You know?
Yeah. Okay, I have one thing to say about that, and then maybe we
Yeah.
should try to talk about what actually happened in the game a bit, just to give some context of it. But so I think the biggest thing for me that I remember feeling like was there's all these like little delightful tables in the book, and there's little mechanics for because there's a lot of different stats that the characters have. There's like little mechanics, like there's like a saving throw mechanic
Hmm.
basically, and then there's also like a bunch of different tables that are kind of weirder. Like there's like one for like social interactions and stuff. So it's not
Yeah.
all just the basic like one mechanic. And playing it, I really felt like so there is a time when you have to use certain mechanics, but then there's also like certain tables and certain roles that can get you can kind of like just pull them into what's happening. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like because there was all this just basically a big splatter of different little things to pull from, it really felt like as the GM, because a lot of the times I would be the one prompting roles or using like certain one of the tables. Not always, but a lot of the time. I
Mm-hmm.
really felt
Yeah,
like
you were.
I really felt like there was this sense of like it being like a creative choice to use a table.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to because it's like, okay, when this happens, I roll. But for this game, I really felt like this feels like a nice creative choice. This is like I want to use this table, and I could in some situations we could not, and that would be perfectly like within
Right.
the rules for us to do. That's it's so it's interesting like this idea of disclaiming responsibility with these tables. I think I want to get away from that idea and
Yeah.
get into this idea of I have my little palette of tools and I love like sometimes I'm going to use it and then maybe other times I won't
Mm-hmm.
in these kind of for this kind of special case of these floating these mechanics that can kind of get magnetized to something rather than ones that are already kind of tightly coupled, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
um so like there's the tightly coupled like combat mechanics. We're in combat. We're gonna use these certain mechanics. Like if someone's behind someone else, they're gonna get a bonus, unless the other person like spends energy or whatever to turn around. Um,
Yeah.
Things like that. And then other things feel like I don't know. It felt like this game had a lot of that power for me because of all this like cloud of things. So um,
Yeah. And
yeah, so I liked it.
and I've been after taking Ron's situation and story class, I kind of see. I think it's just such a helpful language to think about. And uh, one of the things that that class helped me realize is that what we think of as um, magic systems, power systems, random creature generation, all of that stuff is really giving you bounce for situation creation
Mm-hmm.
because like a power might have, well, so first off, combat results or combat outcomes are going to be situationally relevant, right? So there's no
Oh yeah,
everything happens inside situation, but like a power is going to give you a new way to interact, a highly impactful, sometimes, very procedural way to interact with the rest of the situation. So, like, for instance, Robin's character Figment had telepathy, and without by spending one power point could read the minds of everyone within 2 football fields.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so suddenly, right, we had this totally new way of interacting with hidden information because basically there wasn't any. If
Right.
Figment was in the room, then all information that was inside people's heads was known to us. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and so yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense that especially from the from the GM side where you're maybe responsible for like numerically more situational elements, that how well those systems worked would really be clear because you're kind of touching a lot of different components. I guess, would you mind maybe zooming in to how you used a particular table? Like, were you randomizing? Were you picking? Like, how are you actually interacting in the moment with these tables?
Yeah. So yeah, let me think actually. So I think so some of it was just applying some simple like the saving throw rolls. I think a lot there was like a couple social rolls that were made with like the social table about like with alignments.
Okay.
Um and then I think um yeah, I think most of the little tables that I was using were related to like just getting the stats of something quickly, like the
Yeah.
T-Rex that was in the game. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like a specific example. So, okay, so I think maybe we should get into some of like what happened in the game. to
Yeah.
kind of talk about this. So, yeah, do you want to like I don't know. Do you want to try to summarize it or I should? I don't know. I can say like what I came with. So
Yeah.
in the book there's somewhere in the book where it says like, you know, there should be like a like kind of theme to the superhero group to kind of
Hmm.
like unite it. And and then obviously like the players play themselves in Villains and Vigilantes. So
Yeah.
like it's them but a superhero version. And so the like uniting thing I kind of thought of was like ancient aliens, um, and like the whole like conspiracy theory, pseudoscientific view of like, and also like racist and problematic in a lot of ways view of like history in the world as being like um as having the hand of like of aliens that like have you know done things or introduced things or like built monuments or like the pyramids and then like other like in like Central America there's
Yeah.
all these like really weird just completely ridiculous theories about that. So I think the kind of theme for the superheroes that I brought was that, and then we knew where it was taking place, and then I think that's like kind of all we had.
Hmm.
um and I kind of had before the game started, I think I was already thinking about like a little bit about possible villains, but I think it really shifted um because when the two of
Yeah.
you made your character, yeah, so if you want to talk a bit about um
Well, I was just gonna say we should put a pin in like villain creation because you use character creation rules for some of them and then not for others, or like that. I think that
yeah,
was another um, instance of you kind of using the instruments in the book. But yeah, so just a high level overview. Like you said, Villains and Vigilantes, you play yourself. The GM rates your attributes based on what they know of your physical and mental conditioning. Um,
yeah,
the so you and I mean it. Talk about risk and exposure. You play yourself having come into possession of these like random wild powers that you've rolled
hmm
on the tables. And so we had two characters. Uh, they they were living like Robin and I were at the time, in the same house, kind of as the best of friends. Robin's character was named Figment, kind of a telepath, priestly sort of character, and then I was playing Drifter, who had the ability to create portals into the multiverse, and kind of jump through them into different universes and times, um, and so we were kind of we weren't playing with our goals very articulated. We were kind of jumping around in different universes trying to just figure out what was going on. We knew, oh, and our powers had come from a crashed alien spaceship out in the desert that we
yes,
discovered. So we
yes,
had these implants. Figment had a cranial implant that made her head glow when she used telepathy, and I had a chess piece that let me create these portals, and I also had a saber-toothed tiger that I found in
yes,
a
cool as shit,
in a storage pod in the ship because I rolled a pet. Um,
yes,
and yeah, so it in terms of, I mean, we can go into more specifics, but across 7 sessions, um, we saw us, encountering um, different villainous threats, and in the beginning, just kind of randomly jumping around. A lot of hard framing from you, right, where you said like, okay, I know that after work you're like jumping to these other universes. This is the universe you're in. Here's what you see, and kind of going from there to really getting to know our way around and making like very impactful choices um, on, I mean, I'd say like the multiverse. Really, we
yeah,
we
yeah,
took on a lot of action in that time. And but within that, still playing around with this, this color of some ancient aliens and um, definitely some pseudoscience, some kind of silly sci-fi tropes, and multiverses, and it was just like it was really a miscellany of just a bunch of stuff we all liked.
Yeah, and I think so like thinking about how like the first villains
Yeah,
got created. So I think I had some ideas and then I kind of put them aside because of the I think literally the role for the pet and you choosing a saber-tooth tiger, which was in this pod. I was like, holy shit, well, there was definitely some other pods in
that's
this
right.
spaceship. And so I had the my terrifying villain, the Neanderthal, or otherwise known to some as the last Neanderthal,
Or
who
Ellen, as
had
I
been,
affectionately
yeah, or
nicknamed him
LN,
after
yes.
we became
And
friends.
he, exactly. And I also, so my original concept, like, I just was like, oh man, I want to have a Neanderthal who was frozen and he's been woken up and he's like, what the fuck? And he's read like one magazine and he's like, humans did what to Neanderthals? And so, and then for him though, what really snapped it together was I rolled the power to like revive the dead on him, like revive it. Yeah, I have this like tattered. Look at this. I mean, this is
Wow.
horrific. What's happened in his favor? But I don't know. I think I put it in like a couple different notebooks. But yeah, he had the power revivification, and I was like, oh wow, so he's like reviving. Like there's something about him kind of wanting to bring back his people. So his concept was he was like, okay, well, I'm going to this other dimension, which was like the like dream dimension of the extinct Neanderthals, where they got to live forever, and there were no Homo sapiens ever came and wiped them out. Um, and so he was gonna like bring them back into Earth. And then I think my other villain was the raptor, who was a velociraptor who was uplifted by this intelligent computer, who had also taught the Neanderthal things. And that I also going in see both of these I was like I had like a skeletal concept. So for the Raptor 2, I was like, I want to have a Velociraptor villain who is like, um, I wanted to have a Velociraptor villain. But then for him, like there was some cool synchronicity to that because, like his weakness was related to like not having good self control.
That's
Um,
right.
so he's like a Velociraptor. So it kind of like I was like, oh, he's intelligent like a person, but he kind of like if he smells blood, he might just like not be thinking like in he might just go into like lizard brain mode, whatever that means. Um, so that's kind of how those two um, villains came about,
Hmm.
and yeah, so I think the I think the random process there, like it felt yeah, it felt really important that I got some of those certain results, and then other ones weren't as impactful. Like there was definitely some where I rolled and I was like, okay, that's kind of there, but then there's also you kind of remove some powers. I think at some point, like you take one or two away or something, and
Mm.
so I think I don't really remember, but
Yeah, there's some give and take in being you're not just stuck with exactly what you roll. You can wiggle it a little
right,
bit. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that felt really good, and I think that started this feeling for me of like, I mean the way you roll, it's not that you just roll from a huge list. You kind of choose a list to roll on. So it'll be like gadgets or something, or like like something like supernatural or whatever else and you actually roll like you choose the list to roll on and I think it shows you like early on like there's these random things we're using but I kind of am having this hand in what we're using
Yeah.
so I think that kind of I don't know I think that sets an interesting stage for then like how do you treat the rest of the book? How do you like use certain things? Yeah,
So
so that's kind of how I arrived at those villains. Yeah.
yeah, so a question for you, how so you're describing getting these inputs, either from the tables or also like from what Robin and I were making of our crazy characters, um, and kind of using that to build out the situational components you have authority over. How, if we were going to take the same language of like sometimes just accepting what you roll, sometimes customizing it, or adding to it, and then sometimes there being like some procedural wiggle room there. Maybe like you roll, but then you get a choice within a table, or if you don't like a roll, you drop it and replace it with another one. How how would you describe that happening with Circle of Hands, and why?
Oh yeah.
Like how could you take this, because Circle of Hands has a really you randomly roll up the situation just like in Villains and
Yeah.
Vigilantes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think okay, so I think for me the villains and vigilant the big difference probably is thinking about so okay, so playing Circle of Hands. Um I think I've had some good I've prepped well a couple times for Circle of Hands. Where I felt like, okay, I have this. I mean, you don't really need to be very interesting in the prep. You just
Yeah.
need to, there's steps you need to. Of course, like you like I think you want to feel excited to see what happens, but I
Yeah.
don't think you need to like you don't need to create some really convoluted thing. Like if
Right. Yeah.
you have your humanitarian crisis and like a Herbaja zone or whatever, you don't have to make it super complex for it to be interesting when the knights actually are like there and doing things. Um,
Right.
I think it's much more about like the once you start having the charm rolls, that's like where the situation kind of gets interesting.
Hmm.
But I think for me, playing Circle of Hands, I just don't think I had the like trove of imagery and like um emotion or feeling that I had for this. So I'll give like an example, like the last Neanderthal, who kind of sounds like a goofy guy, and like to a certain extent, he was funny because he rode like a motorcycle, he smoked cigarettes and stuff. He likes cigarettes.
God, he was so
Um,
cool.
yeah, he's a really cool guy, and he kind of like was at first like this kind of like kill all humans guy, and then he became like a hippie, but in like a kind of maybe just like an aesthetic hippie, not really like actually hippie, not actually peaceful. Um, very quick to suddenly grab a gun. Um, but I think I also felt like I could give him like a soul and a personality, and I had this. I don't know why it felt easier, but it felt like because we were in this comicsy kind of place, I felt like I had so much more to pull from. Um,
Hmm.
so like, and like I felt really free. So there was this part where Robin's character was kind of moving through like the walls of this mountain, or no, maybe not a mountain, like below the desert, basically.
Oh
And
yeah.
the last Neanderthal was doing a he was going to resurrect someone who was dead um, for his followers, and so like I was like, okay, so he's pulling their soul out of this extinction dimension. Like like all of them really have these like holes and portals to this extinction dimension. Um, and their story is being extinct and being like already damned. So when they die, they kind of go to this really terrible place, and they also like kind of hold that like with them or something.
Hmm.
And um, I think once, and then there was all these special effects that had to do with Robin's character, like having this telepathic thing happen with the extinction hell, and she was kind of like exposed to this extinction hell, and it kind of made this like kind of psychic shattering of her telepathic vision or some weird shit like that.
Yep.
Um,
That was
but
a
the main thing was
successful perception roll, I think.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. I think there was something. So so that is okay. There's so much to talk about here, but that was also so like there was a moment where I was like, okay, I'm realizing that you're like, cause okay, this is like a special effects interesting thing. So I don't know, I'm jumping around a lot, but in this scene, I was like, okay, your telepathy is on. That's kind of how her character navigated underground. She would like move
That's
towards
right.
mines.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, your telepathy's on, but this hell is being opened, so you're suddenly encountering, billions of extinct Neanderthal minds, kind of in this swirling neon vortex, like swirling neon green vortex. And so I think I said, okay, you can make there's a role you can do. I basically said you should make a saving throw on like how good you are, because you can make like an alignment, something like an alignment check or something like that. I don't remember exactly what
Hmm.
it is, to kind of try to save yourself from that. And she actually failed that, so she was like overwhelmed with this hell. Anyways, what I'm trying to get to is, so it was cool special effects wise, and also, God, I'm like talking talking so much, but and also, yeah, it's cool special effects wise, and also it those things coming together kind of gave me this new understanding of like the real pain of these people. I mean,
Yeah.
um, I think actually part of it, honestly, I've been reflecting on because, and I'm talking about this more and more, but I'm religious in a way that I never talk about, and so I think actually. I feel like this game actually, weirdly looking back at it, had a lot of like spiritual concepts at the core of like what the characters were thinking about,
Oh, yeah.
especially my villains. And so I was just using that. And then, okay, to get to the difference with Circle of Hands, I think one of the things that stumped me with Circle of Hands is I don't know, I don't feel like I have a way into the religious or spiritual minds of the characters,
Mm.
because I don't really understand what the religion actually like does, and I
Right.
can't understand like what spirituality maybe would feel like for these characters. So maybe that's part of it, but I
Yeah.
don't I don't know if that's actually it. But I've always felt like playing it, I just don't like own it. Um
Hmm.
yeah. So I think there's a lot of things. It's probably mainly just like I've always struggled with like using someone else's thing. I kind of like just being like, okay, this is like, even though I know that the Crescent Land isn't Ron's,
Hmm.
in logically I know that, but
Yeah.
somehow mentally or like emotionally I don't feel it when I'm playing. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
No, that makes sense to me. Even though, yeah, like rolling, what would it be like rolling a chimera in in your situational prep for Circle of Hands is exactly the same as rolling the T-Rex in Villains and Vigilantes. Yeah. So I'm thinking,
yeah,
I'm yeah. I mean, I think you're revealing a lot about about prepping well, like the idea that you come in with some initial um, some initial spark for the situational elements, but we know that any meaning or any like real power they're gonna have, it's not, you won't come up with it before you start playing. Um, and you don't need a lot either, like some games might be more procedurally intense, but you don't need like a ton about every character to play them well and to get to that point of inspiration. Um, yeah, I wonder if part of the so we're talking about like the shared. or not shared, but like us all having, a trove of imagery and creativity and fictional excitement we're drawing on. Um, which yeah, I'm just thinking like I think both you and I we were playing Champions Now with Rod while we were doing that. So we were
Hmm.
playing a lot of superhero role playing, like tons of imagery every week. Um, we were both like really doing some concentrated game design work, so I think we're really excited procedurally. And yeah, so just thinking about like what are the activities around good play, right? That can
Yeah.
contribute to it. That you're, it's not just this isolated activity. We're bringing real parts of ourselves to it, and play isn't something totally separate from the rest of our lives, and can be actually very meaningful and very revealing about ourselves. Yeah, so I'm thinking about that, and maybe also just thinking about like usefulness in procedures that like you were talking about, like Villains and Vigilantes has so much stuff that you need for superhero role playing, like a T-Rex stat block. There's
Right.
and stuff like that is all over the place in that book. Um, and yeah, so and then also, what do you do? How do you play well when you don't have all of that, swirling, exciting context? How do you, because at that point you're kind of starting with a minimum of inspiration, a minimum of like, imagery and excitement, but how do you go from there into making something meaningful? Because I think you can, but it's a very different process, I think.
Yeah, I think, well, for this game, I think we came in with a good amount of like fun and like funny, humorous inspiration, especially because it's Ancient Aliens. It's funny,
Yeah,
it's like late night shitty TV, like it's just like a funny thing to do. But I really think like actually the moment where it became possible that it could be an interesting game was the moment we were talking about earlier with this idea of this hell dimension being kind of permanently attached to these people's kind of like beings or souls or something.
yeah,
Um, and I will say actually I remember what happened. So there was that role that Robin failed that role, something to do with alignment, I don't remember. And then I was like, I had seen on the powers list, it was something like cosmic
that's
awareness.
right. Yeah,
And so you can ask a question to the GM. And I was like, oh, well, now you can ask a question to this hell, and this hell will answer. It is the truth of
that's
everything in the
that's right.
entire universe. And so the idea of it was like, I don't remember what she asked, but it was something about death or something, and it was basic like, this extinction hell gave a very horrific answer that would probably drive you crazy if you think that that's what the meaning of the universe is. So I think her character kind of started this arc of like trying to move through this horrific, basically bit of like spiritual, this horrific moment of
Trauma.
spiritual fervor,
Yeah,
basically. Yeah, exactly. So like I think that's where um the idea of that's where that idea got suddenly like sparked up in the middle of play. And I think also, okay, here's another thing. I'm really reflecting a lot of my Circle of Hands play because I want to play it again. And
mm,
because I really like, I've seen like moments where I feel like I've had it go well for me. And I'm realizing another thing is going into this game, I didn't know that we were gonna see this moment. I wasn't expecting anything like that. I literally made the last Neanderthal and the raptor, and I was like, all right, here's
yep,
these fucking assholes. Like, what are you gonna do about it? And then like we saw this amazing moment, and I feel like it it really worked because I wasn't looking for it. But I think in the past with Circle of Hands, I've read the book and been like, oh man, this could be like the best role-playing game experience ever, and we should be like, we're gonna see moments like XYZ.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
that's really like that is a killer for
You can't take it seriously, and you can't expect it to be or you can't, yeah, you can't expect it to be excellent. You know,
yeah,
you can expect
exactly.
it to be
So then
functional. That's it.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is if you go in with that expectation, then, there's also maybe a part of you that shuts off to like,
Yeah.
what if this session of Circle of Hands was funny? Or like, you know what I mean? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
this isn't the time when it's insane, when it's like the grim session that you're kind of expecting, or what if there's like some kind of hopeful um resolution that's surprisingly wholesome, not wholesome as in like the Reddit way of saying it, but like um that surprisingly like
Sweet.
feels
Yeah.
really substantial,
Yeah.
or sweet, exactly. So I think like my I think that's a little bit of my reflection too there. um like this game, that little spark that you're talking about, I think it's actually important almost to, when you're starting, have like a spark that you're willing to let move and be
Yeah.
surprising in some way.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe, yeah, I mean, trusting and like in this particular medium, um for with some exceptions for some games, I guess, like you can't do it yourself. um and so also like the other people become really
Hmm.
essential, because that moment was really meaningful. And with Figment having the cosmic awareness, that was so cool. And then if I recall, at the end of that session, she went home and reincorporated it by doing a
Yes.
tarot
Yes.
reading about it, and beginning that
Yes.
search for meaning, something unprompted by you. um and so it's not just about like kind of tending your little flame, right? It's about being willing to kind of open it up and really make it interactive with others.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, I just about that tarot reading scene, because my partner into tarot, I'm like one of these people who I hate tarot. I'm like, oh, this is boring. But then I have a tarot reading and it really always freaks me out. And I'm like, this is weird shit. I don't like it. It feels too real, because when someone you really love, or and who loves you, is doing it, they know too much about you, so it's like, stop, don't misinterpret. So I know a bit about tarot, and so that scene was great because I think I actually said what the reading was. Like I knew like the right cards that should come out to make it feel kind of like, um I don't know, there was something to it that was kind of interesting. Like I think there was a role involved or something, but um
I think no, I
anyways,
think you said that a
okay.
card popped out.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
and honestly,
Right.
I think in kind of a throwaway, like you weren't putting a ton of thought. If my memory serves,
No.
you were like, uh, all, like when you're shuffling, a card always pops out. Like it's like the
Yeah.
Hangman. It's always the Hangman, right? And then
Yes.
again, like
Yes.
Robin picked that up and turned it into some, or invested it with meaning, right? In her response to it. And again, that's another good example where you kind of, I, and I think this happens with our play a lot, because we have a pretty deep shared well of tropes, where we'll just throw something out that's like, oh, it's like, it's always this in sword and sorcery, and then but like
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes the other person picks it up, and it goes from being funny, light, inconsequential, to being like really meaningful and weighty. And it's always because someone
Yeah.
else like picked it up and was like, oh, that actually meant something to me. And you're like, oh yeah, I think means something to me too. It's that process of revealing ourselves to each other.
Yeah. I think I was reading at the time, I was probably reading like rereading Spider-Man or something. And so like maybe the Man Thing or something. It's
Hmm.
like Swamp Thing type thing.
Okay.
And it both I mean Man Thing I think has like Howard Duck in it and stuff, like the
Uh-huh.
this like duck guy, and it's pretty ridiculous. And then obviously Spider-Man is really ridiculous, like um just certain villains are like I always forget this character, Paste Pot Pete or something, or
Yeah,
just
that's
like these
right.
weird ass like just like I remember showing my friend like Paste Pot Pete. They're like, what is it? But so I think having this feeling of like humor and lightheartedness, I think it actually lets you feel like the the fiction is a little more. It's ready to. It makes it feel like the humor and lightheartedness of it, some of the like the weird contradictions of like, okay, we have this kind of serious stuff happening, but it's being done by this Neanderthal guy on a motorcycle. Like, I think it's really that kind of very very like spattered or weird or like disparate kind of content is really always ready to like form into a hard mold when there is something really strong that's happening, like
Hmm.
when like it's kind of like you can picture like this I don't know, like it feels like metal that can quickly cool into like a shape all of a sudden, um because there's so much there's all this there's all these kind of hanging questions about like why these things can exist together, or maybe like these feelings of kind of yeah, just like a lot of I can't think of the right word, a lot of energy that's waiting, and then like certain moments it feels like it's easy for it to come together in surprising ways
Yeah.
because there's kind of no expectation as to like how it's going to ultimately come together. I don't know if
Hmm.
that makes sense, but like
No, it
um
does. Yeah.
that's kind of how I felt with these villains. Like it felt like there was no like any villain could just be completely funny and get knocked out and then be done, or they could suddenly be something more. Like um there was, Noah's character was trying to give the Neanderthals like their own dimension that they could go and live in, and he was actually working with the last Neanderthal to do this. Um, so they were going back to like some nice dimension with, a bunch of huntable animals, stuff like that. And this character, the Cosmic Beetle, who was kind of like a interdimensional cop, basically, who was kind of was basically like a big battleship that would kind of fold into a person-sized thing, like very nonsensical guy, kind of like came to bust Noah and be like, "Hey, stop that," and was gonna like basically take him to court. And I was like, "Oh man, like maybe we're gonna
There
get
was
to
a
see this."
committee involved. If I
Yes, exactly. And it was supposed to, I was like, not it was supposed to be, but I was kind of like, all right, maybe this Beetle guy is gonna like get, maybe we're gonna see this committee. So I was thinking about this committee, and then Noah just kicked this guy's ass, and kind of sent him into another dimension, and that was kind of the end of him. And I think like that character, it was like okay for that character to just be
yeah.
funny, and there was no expectation really of anything like deeper.
Hmm.
But that, so I think, and it was the same for all the villains. And I don't know, I think like some games that I've had trouble with, I'm coming in with this expectation of something deeper is inherently present in the
Yeah.
system. Like again, I'm just reflecting on Circle of Hands too. I think that's I think that's been a big problem for me. Is I'm like, this session we're gonna see something like grim or deep or whatever, instead of just being like, okay, maybe this time there'll just be like a cool fight.
Yeah. We have to. We have the right game, and we have the
Yes.
right people here, and I'm ready. Like I've read it enough times, and I have the right
Hmm.
prep, and everything's right, and there's no way this can fail, and that will. It's sort of the flip side. I was thinking the other thing you can do with pre-play fictional elements is disdain them. If we had gone into the Ancient Aliens thing, or actually no, into comics, I think, if we had
Yeah.
approached it with disdain, this is
Hmm.
thankfully, we are not under that illusion that comics are like second rate, literature or totally meaningless. But if we had gone in with that, it would have killed inspiration just a stone dead as taking it too
Oh yeah.
seriously.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And if we were just like totally just in tropes and just seeing like, our version of some comic, I think we just wouldn't have gotten all the cool weird shit that I haven't seen happen in comics, frankly. So
No,
like um yeah, it's yeah. Okay, I'm trying to think of yeah, is there other stuff you want to talk about this? I could go on and on about this, I'm realizing. So
I
I
mean,
want to give you a chance to bring something up.
no,
Um
no, I I could also go on and on. But I actually
yeah, is
think
there
that
another
this is like really helpful for me. Um, well, there is one thing I want to talk about, but yeah, just yeah, I think that this is a good companion piece, right, to our other video that we recorded about improving.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
this is almost like the mindset to go into play with. How do we get into whatever state of playfulness and responsivity and alertness that we need to be in to like play really well and to be open to meaning emerging and making meaning, all those really profound things. But I don't know, I think this is really helpful like from a prep perspective, whether that's player prep or GM prep. Um, and I'm even thinking now about some other games I've played since where it took me time to like get into this space we're talking about, and I don't think it has to be hard. I don't think it has to be this really difficult thing to get there. um some days it might be
Mm-hmm.
easier than others, but I don't think we're talking about something super arcane or super difficult. We're saying like make play fiction that you want to see and that you care about and that you think is like funny and potentially good, but don't expect yourself to like make the best thing ever. And also don't go into it with like disdain or looking down at the activity or the fiction that you're making. Like that's not, anyone can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know the one thing I did want to talk about, so looking back across the whole arc, um but this was one of the best games of the year for me. I loved the fiction. It was so fun, like so just good all the time. I really never felt like it was like my alertness to it was lagging. But I do
Mm.
remember, we'll go back to the Cosmic Beetle. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like the first session where you introduced him, I remember you were having like a crisis of self-confidence.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I
Oh,
don't know.
I'm glad
So
you brought that up. I kind of forgot.
no, yeah, and I don't want to therapize you. And feel free to turn, but I'm just so curious, like, how does that coexist with now looking back, seeing like, oh my God, like this was really meaningful, and there were a
Yeah.
lot of lessons learned. But like in that session, it maybe two or three times you were saying things like, oh, I hope this isn't boring, or like I hope this
Yes.
character doesn't suck. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what was going on in my mind. I was like, see, yeah, you were like I said, the whole thing was okay, there's a cosmic cop. And I was like, okay, cosmic beetle, because I rolled that he had like an insect body. And then so I was like so excited for how he looked. Like I knew I would describe how, suddenly this massive like
Folds, yeah.
battleship. Yeah, so there's like this massive battleship appears over the planet and the cosmic beetle is sitting in it and then you're looking up at it, and there's this weird visual thing that happens where suddenly he is like has the battleship as his wings, and then he kind of stomps into the ground, and it's just like this weird thing. So he's like in some way as big as this. He is the battleship that he's riding in. I was just like really into this imagery of this guy, and like his wings that were his battleship, but then he was actually just your size fighting you. So it was like, um,
Well, a little
I don't know.
bigger. I think he weighed 3 tons or
Yes,
something in
yeah, he did. Yes,
in
because of his
numerical
he rolled
terms.
ridiculous armor. Yes, the armor added like an insane amount of weight. It like multiplied his weight by. Um, but I suddenly realized when he crashed into the ground, I was like, I just don't like. It felt like he had no. He was just kind of showing up to like try to fight you in a very in a way that like is very. I mean, it happens in a lot of books. Like suddenly there's just like this guy who's like kind of there to fight and
Hmm.
has like I mean, you can explain it later using like captions and shit or like whatever else you want. Or if you want to be really grueling and boring, you can do an issue on the villain's origin that everyone's obsessed with. But like I just felt like, oh man, am I just totally like I didn't know if I was just putting up a wall in front of what you were trying to do or if this was like a fun thing. Because I think I was so interested in the like visual of it that um I got almost like lost in that. But then I think during the session you kind like and I maybe I was like I don't know, yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know why I was so unconfident about it, but I think you said like think of how many villains have just started as some asshole who's
Yeah,
I mean, this isn't exactly what you said, but some guy
yeah.
basically who's coming in with a suit
Unfortunately,
on.
not Pete. He didn't get to grow into, you know,
Yes.
into greater
Yeah.
proportions. But
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just like yeah, that and actually in the last session or maybe the session before that, I was also having a really hard time playing some of the. Yeah, I think I
oh,
just
that's
yeah, I
right.
think
Yeah, I
so.
forgot
The big
about
arc
that.
is yeah. So the big arc was the fighting the just to explain because it's only 7 sessions. So I think just to lay it out, like the big arc was you fighting the um team up of the Neanderthal and the Raptor. Um, they kind of kicked your ass. Well, you got kind of laser beamed by the raptor, and then
Hmm.
but you had this intense social interaction with the Neanderthal. So suddenly the Neanderthal's on your side, and the raptor's like, "I'm gonna go find another pack. You guys suck. You're not. The Neanderthal. I thought we were gonna kill everyone." So the raptor goes off and makes a new villain. Kind of corrupts the mother computer who into this whole thing and opens a new portal because the whole thing was the Neanderthal wanted to open a portal to the Jurassic realm so all the big dinosaurs would come and eat everyone. So the raptor goes and does that, but the two superheroes kind of intercept it. Um, I think just kind of go through the portal, maybe destroy it, but maybe not.
Yeah, and
And
the raptor kills the last Neanderthal.
oh yeah, the raptor. Okay, because to open the portal, you needed, of course, like a lot of energy and blood
Hmm.
and like dimensional energy. So you have to kill a lot of stuff,
And Drifter
obviously.
wreaked like bloody vengeance on the
Yes,
raptor for that. Yeah.
yes. And then Drifter got kidnapped by the mother computer,
Hmm.
kind of put into this pod, and she was like, "I'm gonna do experiments on you." And so that's where the game kind of ended with the fight between uh, Robin's character Figment, who was teamed up with um, some cavemen because cavemen actually lived with the dinosaurs. I don't know if you know that, and they rode velociraptors.
That's
Um,
just
so she was
science. Yeah.
yeah, that's just science. So she kind of was teamed up with them, and there was like they kicked the mother computer's ass. And I think in that last session, I was also really, I was like, man, the mother computer, I just don't know what she's about. She's just you know torturing Noah's character basically, having a doing like these experiments on him.
Well, I think you
I
were having a hard time too because I got KO'd like four across the combat like 4 times too, and I if
yeah
if I recall that was I when like I kind of got some agency back in the lab and did some damage to the computer, and then she like came back and kind of knocked me out right away. and
Yes.
and
Oh
again, yeah, I
yeah.
wonder if part of that was like, am I just like what you said with the blue beetle, right? Am I just like stonewalling Noah's intention for his character or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I think also it took a bit of there was some more interesting special effects where later on, I don't remember exactly what happened, but later on basically there was another special effects blow up that led to Noah and Robin's characters kind of getting an understanding of the mother computer's like spiritual cosmic understanding. Like she had this paranoia or maybe knowledge that she was just part of this tale being told by an alien who was smoking a pipe, who was telling the story of the whole cosmos. Because that was my kind of brainiac. Like this is what created the cosmos. Everything is just this loser puffing on a pipe, telling all this shit. And she was like, "I'm gonna do exactly what I'm not told. I'm not gonna be told anymore." And I think that was a moment where I was like, "Okay, now I can play this character again."
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what that lack of confidence is. I think you're right. It's something to do with the, am I just stonewalling your character? Or, um,
Well, yeah, I mean,
yeah, I don't know.
I think um when I'm worried about that, right, it often comes, or maybe it doesn't come from, but the way I've worked around it, right, is again to remember that um what I'm laying down doesn't have to be good on its own. It's when it gets picked up by someone else that
Yeah,
it's going to take on
yes,
quality, and when I pick up something they've thrown at me, the same thing, right? So I don't need to. And yeah, and I've probably felt this being the GM and just a player. Um, but yeah, I feel like in those situations, I usually feel better if I just think like, all right, let's step back, like let's just do the basics. What do I need to do to play this character? They don't have to be great.
hmm
Cool things don't have to happen, and then also like let's listen really closely to what everyone else is doing, because they're gonna bring something that like sparks me, or that interacts in a weird way, and creates special effects.
yeah, yeah. I think part of maybe the like, so both of those moments happened right after things had kind of come together that all of us had done and said, right? So like
Yeah.
the the cosmic beetle thing happened after this huge conflagration, or however you say that word, of special effects had led to this crazy result that none of us could have done alone. And during that whole thing, as the GM, I have a lot of responsibility in Villains Vigilantes to really, you want to really hammer the special effect, like you want to really like dig into them and make them really matter and really validate what's going on in every way you can. So like mechanically, whatever else. And so I felt like I was totally destroying it. Like I felt like I was like killing it. So I was doing
Yeah.
amazing. I was like absolutely like channeling just everything that I want to channel. Like I felt like I knew exactly what I had to say. Like I was spouting, green fire from my fingertips or whatever. Like literally feeling like a
Yeah.
sorcerer. And then
And
and
all of
then
us feeling like that too, in our.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then the thing is though, that can lead to a bit of pride,
Mhm.
um and a bit of avarice where you're like, okay, I just did that, I like fucking, I have this green fire coming out of my eyes, but really like it is you and you are rocking it, but also like it's because there's like this context building, there's these feelings building, there's this imagery building. So then like suddenly being like, okay, well, all right, we're on this planet and this guy who smokes cigarettes, and I'm like describing him putting out a cigarette, and he's the cosmic beetles coming down to kick your ass. Suddenly it's like, man, my like huge fucking epic thing that kind of felt like a crazy guitar solo is kind of died away a bit now, and we're back to like kind of building up the little clay man that we're gonna hope is gonna turn into dancing living thing. Like I think part of it is a little bit of pride on my end of being like, okay, I should still be like killing it, but really I'm not in that killing zone anymore. You know what I mean? I don't know if killing
Yeah.
zone is the right thing to say, but both instances were the same, right? Because the
Yes.
second one happened after the huge portal fight, which was so awesome, crazy fight around this portal with all this awesome special effects and like a dinosaur, like a big T-Rex getting mind controlled and shit. Like very fun. A lot of bikers because the Raptor had started his biker gang, the Raptors. Like everything you could possibly want. And then yeah, and then the mother computer fight was kind of like it had to build again.
Hmm.
So I think it's just a bit of my own like it's some kind of folly of being like, okay, maybe when I'm playing, I need to be like, okay, wait, you can do this. It's just that you can't do it when it's not sizzling yet at all. So
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think yeah, it's about expectation, and it's about like honoring your own contributions and everyone else's, even when it's not as, it's not as shimmeringly dynamic and exciting.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, because I mean, I think about the yeah, I don't know that I love the language of like building necessarily, um, just because I think that that gets it. It's like it's construction. It feels super intentional, um,
Hmm.
and also I think that we've had sessions that were really good that didn't necessarily build,
Yeah, that's true.
in
That's
this
very
way.
true.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's really about being very alert and kind of honoring all the verbal contributions equally. And that becomes hard, when you're coming off of this high and then you have to like kind of come back down, right? And it is like, what are you up to? It's like, I'm smoking a cigarette.
Right.
We're going to the
Uh-huh.
taco shop. Like Figment and Drifter went to
Yeah.
the taco shop.
Right.
We're just we're doing things that aren't as intense as before, but those are actually going to be just as important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting like because
Because like
yeah, I think
if
in
we
my
hadn't sorry, one more, this
No,
just I
please go ahead.
realize
Yeah.
this, yeah, like we I feel like when we talk about build, right, we're saying like you're going to the taco shop so that you can get to the awesome fight with
Yeah. Yeah.
with the raptor at the abandoned missile silo in the desert. But actually you can also just as truly say we did the awesome fight with the blue beetle and Figment's metaphysical encounter at the nuclear reactor so that we could sit at the taco shop and talk about
Yeah.
this stuff in a more relaxed environment. Like that is just as much an outcome of all that other stuff.
Yeah, that's very true. And actually, it's perfect because we've been playing Vigil, and that's exactly what our Vigil game was entirely. Like all of
Yeah.
the vigilante scenes with my amazing vigilante lone wolf were very brief and were fun, but were definitely not the highlight of the game because most of the
No.
sessions were spent like with these just long personal scenes, some of which were very, it's just like very like kind of thoughtful and slower paced playing. Slower paces and like literally for me having to think more about what I'm going to say
Yeah.
next. But those scenes felt very, very good. Really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely with you. I'm very much with you. I think like
That's so
I want to
yeah.
play so I it's interesting because I think Vigil is much easier for some reason to do it than Villains and Vigilantes, at least. But like I've only played Villains and Vigilantes once, and I played Vigil a bunch now. So
Yeah.
maybe I want to go back to Villains and Vigilantes and just see how can personal scenes be a little more because we had some really good ones, but yeah, I think I want a bit more the next time I
Mm-hmm.
play. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's
yeah,
yeah, I mean, obviously with Villains and Vigilantes, a lot of the procedural density is in the high impact moments, and I mean there are so many cool mechanics in that game
Mhm.
around like how to run, around how to resolve a combat, and stuff that ends up like so. What I think about is in our final session, um, Figment who had walked through the portal like into the Cretaceous period in her tennis shoes and like found her way across the barbaric landscape to this lab,
Mhm.
and had confronted the mother computer but really didn't have the firepower to take her out, and the hunter gatherers didn't either, and so Robin said like, I think I'm just um uh something like, I'm just kind of surrendering to what happens, and like thinking about Drifter, and Drifter was unconscious
Oh
from a
yeah.
previous encounter, and it was very obvious. I was like, yeah, so you're giving up your action to give me a wake up roll, because in
Yeah,
D&D
I
you
remember that
get,
now.
when you get
Yes.
knocked out, every turn you get a wake up roll, and then other people can kind of give you your action to try to shake you out of it. And
Right.
I rolled and succeeded and woke up, and then killed the mother computer, teleported Figment back home, and fired my soul into the multiverse on a laser beam.
Yes, right.
And and
Yes.
I'm just thinking about like, right, how yeah, like that is just that wake up roll was just as impactful as
Mhm.
the scene in the bar in Vigil where your vigilante was like almost started to talk about like his really private, really intense religiosity, or
Yes, yes, yes.
spirituality, and like
Right.
really like, oh, we were both like, oh, holy shit, like something just opened up here, and like
Yeah,
both those
yeah,
moments are the same, like the personal scene and the combat scene, like it's kind of the same thing happening, the same meaning.
yeah. Yeah, it's like so I think the interesting thing for me is looking back on that session with the mother computer, I really see like, where I was not feeling confident. I see such a thread though of like similar ideas or similar thoughts being explored by all of us, um kind of from the first like outbreak of that, with that first major special effects thing we talked about with Robin's character in the hell, the extinction hell.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that I think at the time I wasn't able to feel confident like tapping back into that when there wasn't a feeling of something that was building for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I guess building is probably the wrong word. Like maybe just something is um
I liked
we're screw
sizzling.
yeah,
I liked
sizzling, or
that,
like
yeah.
we're or even like we're scrutinizing something harder and harder. Like we're
Mm,
we're looking for more and more at what is going to happen.
yeah.
It's not like we're like, okay, this scene's going to be about this. I mean, I think you do start to kind of look into this thing, right? So like we're really all interested in the raptor and his gang, and like we're doing all this stuff, and we're also scrutinizing like these emotions that the characters are having. And then maybe like, yeah, maybe that's why I felt like with the cosmic beetle it was harder for me to end the mother computer thing. I don't know, somehow maybe I didn't know where my like attention was supposed to be directed.
Yeah.
Whereas in Vigil, in my experience, I feel like usually you're like in a personal scene, you don't really just like do a personal scene back to back with another one. I mean, you could, but
Mm-hmm.
like I don't think I really would. Uh, or I can't like, or I just haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're always coming off of something that then it feels like your character is going to be responding to it in
Mm-hmm.
some way in that scene. So you are kind of like looking at something still. It's not like you set the scene and you're like, all right, well, let's look at, you know, these characters are going to be talking about this. But you just kind of know what your character has been kind of swimming in previously. So there's like this carrying of that. And then from that social scene, you carry that into your next.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think like maybe I didn't feel that in Villains and Vigilantes because I'm always the one framing scenes. So I'm kind of like, all right, I'm just throwing this one out there. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't exactly know what it is. I think it is a little bit of a different phenomenon though.
No, I think that is
With the two
so.
games.
I think that is so good. The language you just invented around attention that um okay, so villains and vigilantes gets some of its, from having you give two very different qualities of attention or giving
Mhm.
directing your attention in two very different ways. And like in a vigilante scene, when you kind of take proactive uh, violence against an activity, that's also a little different, right? But it kind of
Right.
works by directing your intention or attention in this very intentional way. Um, it makes me think about how like combat scenes. I'm just contrasting with V and V. But
Yeah, yeah.
how V and V will direct your attention in a combat. Like the moments that are really meaningful is when like that one PowerPoint or that one hex is making a huge difference, right? And we're
Hmm.
scrutinizing that so closely. And that's, I think one thing that rich procedures can do is kind of really create that quality of attention. Um, but I think we're also saying like it's important to have it's important to always be ready to shift attention and to go into kind of more curious, open attention. Um,
Hmm.
here we are, like we've had this huge thing. We're still playing though because it hasn't resolved everything. Like we know we're not at the tail end. We're still in the midst of it, but we just have this huge intense like, scrutiny of every PowerPoint, every hex, every damage point. Um, and now we're someplace else, and suddenly we can kind of look at whatever we want, and someone can say,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, what's that over there, let's go over there. And being able to like get into that is maybe a
Right.
skill that could be worked on. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like I like how you said that because yeah, I think that's exactly have especially when it comes to role playing, I don't have regrets. But like if I were to play the Cosmic Beetle session again, um I would probably just be like, all right, let's just like kind of look at the Cosmic Beetle now. Let's just like see him smoke his fucking. I don't remember. He probably smoked American Spirits, but I don't remember. But I have no idea. Or Lucky Strikes, because I think I was making a joke about
No, yeah.
us like
Luck.
being
Yes.
downgraded to Lucky Strikes.
Well, but then in the ads at the end, though, as I recall, the Beetle
Yeah.
had an anti-smoking ad in which he said, I was smoking for dramatic effect in the
Oh my
comic,
god.
right? But don't kids don't
Yes.
smoke. Like
Yes. Okay, and that's because I'd read that Judge Dredd comic where like
that's right.
he's murdering smokers. Okay, anyways. Yes. Yes.
Jesus.
Okay, and I think
Yes.
I should have just I think part of the mindset could just be like, okay, let's just see what we're looking at and see it and understand that we're now looking at our attention has been shifted to something different and it may never go back to the things that we were previously really hammering into and really scrutinizing. Um, we don't need
Yeah.
to be worried about we don't need to be worried about making epic, um, you know, novel or philosophical work that really just is nailing into this thing the whole time.
It's not
Um,
mandatory. Like
exactly.
that's what I'm thinking. Like you're not. No one is gonna force you. It's not mandatory. It's not required to that. Which I mean, you kind of get with. I mean, yeah, you kind of get with like Troll Babe or I bet you could do it with Villains and Vigilantes too, right? Where it's more episodic. Um,
Hmm.
like we know once you leave this region, you're not going to see those characters ever again. But once you leave this situation, like it's kind of over. We're going on to a new one. Um, yeah, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
I think it's really helpful, and I think it's like that. I think, I haven't played Circle of Hands for like a year or more, maybe, but I feel like maybe these lessons will just like help playing. I guess I'm reflecting a lot of Circle, of Hands, but yeah, I think some of these lessons will really help play Circle of Hands, and not like get it right, but just feel like I'm having fun and
Yeah.
like okay, I did Circle of Hands my way, and it was awesome.